Grew up in a home that was probably what you'd call traditional. My dad was always involved in Jewish education. That was his whole career, and he was the headmaster of Forgasz for many years. And in our house, my bedroom was across the hallway from his study, and his study was just this massive library filled with Jewish books. And so I just absorbed that by osmosis. So it was just this presence of this massive library of Jewish life and culture and history. So we weren't very religious, but kind of Jewishness was a really important presence in my life always. You know, there's a kind of movement that they talk about in the US where they say people, it's sort of post-denominational Judaism, and they kind of say, I'm just Jewish. And I kind of feel like that probably is a good description for me. If anything, I might say I'm culturally Jewish or something like that. You know, I spend all of my working hours working in a Jewish context. So for me, that's actually a lot of my expression of my Jewish identity is actually the work that I do. You know, my family's still traditional. We have Shabbat together every week. We do all the Chagim. I go to Kehilat Nitzan, which is the conservative shul. So yeah, it's kind of like a bit of a patchwork made up of lots of different sort of bits and pieces. So I guess people often don't know what a museum director is, but when I say to them I'm the CEO of the museum, that makes sense because I get that in a different context. I guess it means ultimate responsibility for the whole organisation, for everything that we do. You know, I think it involves having the leadership of the creative and artistic aspect of the museum, like having a vision for what that's about, what our collection is, what kind of exhibitions we do, the educational, cultural programs that we do. So I obviously have a team of people who do that work, but it's about providing, I think, the vision and the leadership and the direction on that, and then supporting them in implementing it. I've been here nearly 5 years now, so look, I definitely see myself being here for a bit longer. Like, I don't feel like my job here's done. I feel like there's a lot I still want to do. It's such a huge change for an organisation, for someone new to come in after someone's been there for such a long time, that the kind of change that you want to see, it takes a while for it to trickle through as well. And I probably feel like things are just starting to settle now. So I want to spend another few years here just kind of enjoying it and implementing more stuff that I want to do. Yeah, I don't know what I would do next, but something will come along. I do feel very passionate about Jewish, I guess, education, but not in a formal way necessarily, about just sharing Jewish culture with other people. And that's why I've just always felt like my work here at the museum is such a great fit for me, because I actually just get to do that all the time. And I just think there's only one life. You only live this life once. You don't have time to do it again, so don't waste time doing things that you don't enjoy, that you don't love, that don't excite you. Part of it is about feeling like you're always choosing to be doing what you're doing. You know, I'm doing this because I have to, or I'm trapped, or I don't have any other choice. It's like, no, every day you keep choosing to do what you're doing, and the day you don't want to do it anymore, then decide to do something else. So in terms of that intersection between Judaism and homosexuality, there clearly are issues in the text and in Jewish tradition. I had one encounter once. It was many years ago when I was actually working here at the museum, and I'd been invited to speak at a synagogue, and I was informed that the event that I was speaking at had been cancelled, and I found out afterwards that when the rabbi realised that I was lesbian, he withdrew the invitation. He wasn't happy about it. So that was the only real issue that I've ever had. You know, when I was teaching at Forgasz, I was never aware of anything. There may have been kids or parents or who had an issue, but I've never had to confront anything myself. I mean, obviously for my parents, it wasn't the easiest thing for them initially, but I think, as happens with most parents and most families, it's just wanting their kids to be happy and to be in a loving relationship, and if they see that that happens, then they're okay. With people who do just have a problem with it and believe it's not possible to be gay and to be Jewish. And to be honest, I just don't really engage with them. Certainly if they're religious, I don't feel like I can actually have the argument with them. I think that change within religious communities has to come from within religious communities, from people who are committed to those communities. So I think there's a lot of ways to interpret the text that are more lenient and create a more inclusive Judaism. And I think we see that across a lot of areas. We've seen a lot of changes to do with women in Judaism because the Jewish textual tradition has that capacity to change and develop and to be open to interpretations. And there are a lot of people out there who are interpreting texts in ways that overcome what apparently seem to be very clear problems in terms of homosexuality in Jewish tradition. So I'm not of the view that you write off Judaism because it's irretrievably homophobic. Like, I don't think that's the case. And so there clearly are people who are still very conservative and have very homophobic views about those sorts of issues. But at the same time, I see so much progress. Like on primetime TV, there are gay characters. And even to be talking about those issues on the news and on the project and things like that just wasn't happening 20 years ago, or even 10 years ago. So I think the majority of the Australian population is pretty open-minded and supportive of a lot of these kinds of things. So yeah, I think there's been a huge amount of progress and change. Yeah. The best thing about our community, I think, is that there's a strong sense of tradition and of the importance of, like, we haven't, I think people still feel a compelling sense of want to connect to community and to tradition and to culture. I think everyone can find a place. Like, I think the formal structures and institutions of our community are pretty conservative in a lot of ways and, you know, still belong to another era. And I think there's an overwhelmingly kind of conservative view in the Jewish community. It's like a lot of things that are kind of passé in Israel and in America are still people get freaked out about here. And I don't know if it's because we're a kind of small, isolated community far away from the rest of the world, but I just think it takes a long time for developments in the Jewish world and changes in the Jewish world to catch up. I know a lot of people kind of feel like we're a generation behind America, which is a good thing, but I actually think there's a lot of positive things in terms of diversity in Jewish expression and identity that exist, say, in the US that we just don't have here and we don't have a tolerance for. And I think we just have to embrace some of that stuff. I think the world's changing. And I think Judaism is really robust and strong enough to be able to respond to change. And I think rather than be freaked out by it and say, oh, things aren't how they used to be, to accept changes that happen and then find ways to respond to them. And I think that that's probably, as a community, what we don't do that well. But I think that the community, as small as it is, it's astounding how everyone just, if there isn't a place for them, they'll just make a place for themselves. And I think that probably says a lot about, I don't know, it probably says a lot about the people of the community, as perhaps more than the community itself.